Hello, I'm Adam Levy, the alcohol professor, and here with George Salmon.
I'm George Salmon.
That's George Salmon. We're here to talk about ports and his wonderful portfolio of ports. Now, I have to admit something. My grandfather was Englishman, came from England to the United States, and he brought port to our family. And that was basically, at the big family dinner, we would have a glass of port, or we'd sip a little port, and as a young boy, I got a couple sips here along with my uncle's butterscotch, but I got some sips along the way. And I met George recently, because we're here in New York in September right now, beginning of October right now, and we met a couple months ago at Tales at a Cocktail, which is an amazing event, by the way. And this is probably my first time I actually had a chance to see port being used in a cocktail form. And I think what's interesting is some spirits and wines and drinks should not be, there's a social, you cannot do that, certain things. You cannot put cognac in a cocktail, you cannot put ice in a whiskey, you cannot do certain things. And I think there's a certain social response to someone says, you can't do that port. And I think what's interesting is that you're basically saying it's okay. And here's what we suggest you do. Mm-hmm. So maybe you have a couple suggestions or explain what the path is for today.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because the truth is a lot of people think of port and they think of what has become to be known as the correct way of drinking port, mm-hmm. which is at the end of a big dinner, the port is passed around the table and in a decanter, and everybody sips port and talks and whatever, smokes cigars, whatever. But they forget that this is a stereotyping of how port is enjoyed and drunk. And port has had, as all of these historic wines and spirits has had a cycle of different ways of drinking. And some years ago, we found that people were thinking to themselves, well, we've got to have a big dinner, so only then can we drink port. We're not going to have a big dinner, so we don't drink port. And so, whoa. It doesn't have to be a big dinner. You can enjoy champagne without having a celebration. You can enjoy port without a big dinner. It works very well. And so we, in fact, started on a route that took us to showing people how you can match port with certain foods. Mm-hmm. Now, like all wines or spirits, not everything works with everything. Some things work better with other things.
Yes.
So we found that things like Founder's Reserve, a big full-bodied ruby port, lots of flavor, lots of upfront fruit, works really well with chocolate. And people were looking at the time for something that worked well with chocolate in the restaurant area or in the home area where mm-hmm. you were going to serve chocolate. And that we found worked very well. Works well with a lot of other things, but that was a sort of basic.
A certain dark chocolate or just?
Dark chocolates work better. And as you know, chocolate has the same level of complexity and flavors as so many of the products that we make and sell. So yes, there has to be some matching, and I think that's what makes it perfect. If you take the time to match, then you really get a good sensation out of it. On the other hand, we found that the Tawny Ports, because they've been aged in barrel and had developed from that sort of ruby color into the amber complexities that the Tawny Port has, work much better with caramel. And so this works very well, and we say to people, this works very well with like apple pie that's slightly caramelized, and great for Thanksgiving, and or with tarte tatin, or with creme brulee. But strangely enough, if you enjoy cheese, which is a completely different moment in the United States than it is in Europe.
Yes.
Here people enjoy cheese before the meal.
Right.
In Europe, this is historical. They had to eat the cheese because they didn't eat that well. They had the cheese to fill at the end. Here you'll find that the Tawny Port, the 20-year-old Tawny Port, goes really well with something like a Roquefort cheese, which is really, really strong and salty.
I didn't think of that.
And you would have thought, well, it's more delicate in its look, therefore it go better with a creamy cheese. Right. Actually, the ruby port goes better with a creamy cheese. This would go well with any, I know in upstate New York they make some really nice creamy cheese.
Yes, it does.
This would go really well with one of those. Mm-hmm. The creaminess works very well. It's a strange combination. But anyway, so we talk to people about this, and in that sort of journey, started to stumble across the fact that port had been a classic ingredient in cocktails. And strangely enough, with the people that were building the Museum of Cocktails in New Orleans, and we had long conversations about this with them, and we started discovering more and more that port was a classic ingredient in some of the old traditional cocktails, which thankfully are being recovered and being used now. So I mean, people don't think of a vodka martini as being the ultimate cocktail. There are actually some really complex cocktails. So with that, we went to talk to a lot of mixologists who said to us, port in cocktails, you must be crazy.
Yes.
Why would you do that? I mean, and then we started saying, well, look, actually, if you look back in history, you start finding all these different things. And so now we have the traditional port cocktails, like the port flip, which is very traditional, old.
Can you tell them?
The port flip is a ruby port with egg and. Another one of those questions.
We'll add it online.
However, now we find that there's a lot of modern young mixologists who are taking these ingredients and making them into their own cocktails and flavors. So it's another way of drinking port. It doesn't mean that you can't drink it the traditional way, but it does mean that you have permission to drink it chilled. You have permission to drink it on ice, and in fact, that's the drink that I serve and show my friends a lot is Founder's Reserve on ice, and this I can tell you, with a slice of orange and a little bit of mint, and that's a really.
I think I had that when I was down at Sales.
I'm sure you did.
That really was a change in me when I, again, because my whole stereotype about talking about ports and what I thought port was and how you drank port, to have that in a cocktail like that was opening for me.
Yeah, I really thought it was. It's a different way of doing it, and people tend to say, "Oh, but you can't do that to port." And when they taste it, they go, "That's fantastic." And a favourite of mine that we created, which was the what we call the Sandeman Royale, because we had to give it a
little specialness to it.
And that and the James Bond remake.
Royale. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure.
I had a little bit.
Just making sure.
It was more of a joke than anything else, but it stuck. And that's very easy, because it's our Sandeman 20-year-old Tawny Port with a splash of Chivas Regal, actually, because Chivas Regal is a nice blended whiskey which has a lot of flavour, but it's not overpowering.
Yes.
If you would use a single malt, it would kill the thing. You have a very nice smoky character here, chilled, really chilled, served in a straight up martini glass with a twist of orange, and it's an absolutely delicious cocktail to start off an evening with.
That's great. And can you find some of these recipes online?
Absolutely. In fact, we have a new app that's just been launched.
Oh, good.
For both iPhones and Androids. And if you search under the name Sandeman Cocktails, you'll find that.
Okay, well, I'm Adam Levy, the alcohol professor here at George Salmon, and we just basically dispel the myth what you can do with ports. Thank you.
Thank you.